Okay, so in this video, I'm going to discuss ideas for new things that I would like to see make it to Broken Arrow. This is going to be basically in the same vein as the series of videos I made back last November about this same basic topic. Uh, I'm making this one now because since the Russian National Guard specialization is going to come out soon, I figured I should make this video before that specialization comes out. I have a list of things. It's not a big list, and I don't expect this video to be too long, but I have a list of things to talk about. Also, there's going to be some B-roll in the background. I- I'm recording this audio separately, but there should just be some deck building B-roll in the background. I will, if I can, I will try to put up pictures of the various things that I'm talking about, but honestly, there's not going to be too much. The first thing I wanted to cover was just this doesn't really have anything to do with Russia specifically, or any nation for that matter, even though a number of the things that I'm going to mention are Russian related. And one thing I just honestly like to see is more customization options for infantry specifically. And I mean, you've got customization options like, for example, VDV Cornet goes from VDV Cornet to Cornet M. I mean, I'm okay with that, but what I would really like to see is, for example, something like the Sun Key. In my video where I listed out a number of things from the PTE that I would like to see come to life, I mentioned the Descent Key 90 customization option for them, but in general, I would just like to see more things, like maybe an assault version of Descent Key, something that is kind of similar to the VDV Sturm that VDV Dish get, but maybe with two what is it, RPG 7v2s, that's the thermobaric version. So like two RPG 7v2s, some shotguns, and and maybe a couple of RPKs and 10 armor. In fact, honestly, I would like to see a similar customization option for either Multiporovka or Mostostreliki. Honestly, I think I would go with probably like this is kind of the thing I'm talking about, because just a customization option where you can give them um where you can swap out their weapons. For example, Mostostreliki has 5 AK-74s and 2 RPKs. Um Motoporovka has 6 AK-74s, a PKP, and an SVD. Like, maybe take Motoporovka and give them an option that swaps out the PKP and the SVD, and maybe one of the AK-74s for a trio of shotguns. Uh, I'm actually not sure what specialization I would do that for, though, because motorized has a number of CQC options. Like, you've got Spetsnaz GRU, which can do it, even though, if I'm going to be entirely honest, well, I mean, the AK-15 can do it, and the VSS can do it, but with as much as what Spetsnaz GRU has, I would not use them for forest fighting except in an emergency. Which kind of makes me think that you could add a fourth loadout for them that just, like, removes the RPG 28s or the Verbas or whatnot and gives them some RSHGs like what the cherry berries get for forest fighting. You also have SSO, which you can argue is pretty good in forests. They get shotguns. They actually get Burrs as well, which is a Russian thermobaric launcher. It's kind of like Oh, I looked this up a few days ago. It's kind of like a smaller, semi-reusable version of the RSG8, of the RSHG1. The RSHG1 is actually the RSHG1 is a thermobaric version of the RPG-27, if memory serves. The Burr is kind of like it's not a thermobaric version of the RPG-26, but it's a semi-reusable. Actually, I think it might be an RPG version of the RPG, or not RPG. I think it might be a thermobaric version of the RPG-18, but no, that's not what I wanted. Uh, I I'm looking this up because I do not want to make myself look stupid. There we go. Oh, it's a variant of the RPO-A, which is described as a rocket-propelled infantry flamethrower. Description: single shot, self-contained. Okay, so the RPO-A is similar to the RPG-18. You have the RPO-M, which has a larger caliber. The RPO-A, for reference, has a caliber of... Well, the RPO-A has a caliber of 93 millimeters. The RPO-M has a caliber of 90. Okay, well, they're pretty much the same. The MRO-A is a smaller development of the RPO series, caliber reduced to 72.5 millimeters, similar to the RSGH2, which is the development of the RPG-26. The Burr compact grenade launching system is a 62 millimeter. Okay, so it's just a 62 millimeter version of the RPO-M, which I believe the RPO-M, as I'm trying to look this up, is... Yeah, so I have no idea how to pronounce these guys in mech. The flamethrower troops, the guys who have an option between the MROZ or the RPO-M. So Burr is basically just like a smaller version of that. But maybe you could give... Well, you see, this is what I'm talking about, because I'm not sure whether or not I would give a customization option to give either Muslis Streliki shotguns or Multiparovka shotguns, because both of these actually have units that are good, that can be used to fight in forests. Mech has the Guard Sturmoviki, which do have AK-74Ms and some RPGs. They've also got the flamethrower troops, but motorized has SSO and Spetsnaz GRU. Honestly, though, I'd probably give it to motorized, because the only thing that they really have that could fight in a forest would probably be SSO, and I'm not really sure you want to use SSO for that. At the same time, though, if we're talking about different loadouts for infantry, you can make an argument about giving the Guard Sturmoviki a third customization option where maybe they get one RPG 7v2, but they get the shotguns from the it's like a combination between the door kicker option with the flashbangs and then the one with the thermobaric RPGs, where you give them like 3 shotguns and then maybe 1 RPG. And so you could do something like that. Or another alternative, and something that I would honestly like to see is to take mech riflemen and then just give them a javelin. Like, give them an upgrade option for maybe an additional 25 points or so, and then give them a javelin. Drop them down to just having M4s, remove their AT4s altogether, and then just give them a javelin with like 4 missiles for maybe 75 points. I don't know. I think 75 points might be a little too low, but I think 80 points might be a little too high, because, for example, the javelin team in the Baltic is also 75 points, and that's just a 4-man team with no grenade launcher or anything like that. an 80 points is also on par with something like Rangers. Rangers is also 80 points. Airborne NGSW is 85 points. The closest thing you could argue would be Troopers, and that's 90 points, but the squad is 50% larger. Maybe like 75 points with a Javelin with 3 shots. And okay, yeah, it's a 50% price increase, but it's an extra Javelin, which wouldn't hurt. Another option would be taking, like, for example, mech engineers and then having an option that trades in their shotguns and their small IDs for maybe like 3 straws. Or for that matter, the combat engineers over in Striker Cav having a similar option that trades in their shotguns and their small IDs for like 5 or 6 straws. I remember seeing a post on the Discord, something that I'll have to find and put up, where someone speculated about a new customization option for troopers. This one I actually thought was pretty interesting because it gave them a pair of DMRs. You remove the AT4s altogether. I think it gave them some A7 laws. It gave them a pair of DMRs and a couple of other things. I'll have to find it. It was called like Troopers 07. But that honestly, that reminds me of another thing that I had, or another long held belief of mine, was that honestly what I would like to see with Troopers is I would like to see an option to either say to either remove the Javelin or give them another 3 AT4s, for example, for 80 points, or heck, even 75 points. You can either do that, or actually, no, I'd argue that that'd be like 70 points total. So, or you could remove the AT4s to give them a Javelin with like 5 missiles for maybe 100 points. Okay, so I actually found the Troopers 07, and if I can manage it, I'm gonna put I'm also gonna put it on screen. But it's an idea that gives Troopers 8 armor, which they do not already have, which might be a little bit too much, all things considered. 8 armor, an M240, 2 M14s, and a Javelin, along with 2 A7 laws, which are going to be just generally like the laws over in stat-wise. I think it's pretty much the exact same as this. Same pen, same damage. Looks like it has about the same accuracy too. Well, I say this. I'm not recording this. The law in the Lithuanian reservists, the A2 law. So 400-meter range, 300 millimeters of pen. Actually, no, it only has 300-meter range listed here in the card that the person made for it. 300 millimeters HE pen, 6.5 damage. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. Honestly, the whole point of this is just to have different customization options for infantry. And most infantry have different customization options. I'm not gonna say that they don't, but I've seen a number of good ideas. Like, I've seen some people arguing that what you should the RPG 29 team in mech, you should get the option of basically giving them either, because the RPG 29 is kind of like the RPG 27, except it's reloadable. In fact, to my knowledge, it's more like the RPG the RPG 7 in that it's an actual rocket propelled grenade, but it's very similar to the Moz, effectively. Like, the Moz is based off the Carl Gustav. The Carl Gustav is a recoilless gun, not which is not the same as a recoilless rifle. A recoilless rifle has rifling down the barrel. A recoilless gun is smoothbore. But it's similar to the Carl Gustav, and for all intents and purposes, the RPG 29 stat wise, as I'm looking at it right now, where is Rangers? There's Rangers, Ranger Maws. The RPG 29 is just a slightly better M4 Carl Gustav. But one thing that I saw people suggesting is to give the RPG 29 an option between either 12 heat rounds or 6 heat rounds and 6 thermobaric rounds, which I think would be an interesting option. And then I also saw in that post someone suggest doing something similar to Ranger Maws, which I'd argue is less. Russian forces are generally supposed to be more flexible than their U.S. counterparts, so I'm a little bit less sold on the idea of doing something like that for Ranger Maws, but it's an idea that I suppose wouldn't hurt too badly. I don't know. The whole point of this section is to just give infantry more customization options. Like you can maybe give scouts a javelin for an extra 30 points. To just remove their AT4s, give them a javelin with like 3 or 4 missiles, or troopers AA. I don't know, maybe take troopers AA, just give them M4s, but also give them an extra stinger with like another 2 or 4 missiles. Another idea that you have is for various grenade launcher teams, like the Mark 19 AGL team in Airborne, or the the AGS 17 team in motorized, or the AGS 40 team in guards tank battalion brigade, or the VDV grenade launcher team. An option might be to give them a customization option where you remove the grenade launchers entirely, but you replace them with something like a 60mm mortar, or something equivalent for Russia, where the range is longer, maybe 1,000 to 1,200 meters. They hit slightly harder, but the reload time is reduced because it's effectively a mortar. And something that would auto fire, not something that you would have to manually fire, something that would auto fire, which isn't outside the realm of possibility because they did introduce auto fire for 82mm mortars in the PTE. So you could do something like that, I guess. And I suppose you could do it with the M2 Browning as well. And maybe something like the Rangers Mark 47 AGL team as well. Actually, that's a point. I'm just thinking, with the Rangers team specifically, you could probably give them an upgrade that gives them the Mark 19 for maybe only 65 points, and then gives them the Mark 47 for 75 points. Because the only two specializations that I know of where all of the infantry involved have customization options is Marine Corps and Baltic Battalion. And the Baltic Battalion technically doesn't count because they're not customization options. Well, I mean they are customization options, but it's split up by nation. It's arguable that whether or not it's actually customization options to begin with. In fact, for squads like VDV Resvedka or Naval Infantry Resvedka, or just the regular Resvedka, one thing that you could do, and you could probably do this. No, that's most of Streliki. Where is Resvedka? There's Resvedka. One thing that you could probably do, and you could do this as a counterpart to what I was talking about, giving javelins to scouts. You could basically give these guys RPG 28s. Like, we're talking about 5-man teams here, so yeah, so they're all 5-man. Like, give them maybe RPG 28s, like give them 3 RPG 28s. Guard most Strelki is 4. So give them like 3 for maybe an extra 10 or 15 points more. V2V Resvedka's 60 points. Naval Infantry Resvedka's... Or no, V2V Resvedka's 70 points. Naval Infantry Resvedka is also 70 points. And then the basic Resvedka is only 50. Then again, the Naval Infantry Resvedka have more armor. And I'm pretty sure they have better guns as I'm looking at it. They also have better launchers with the RPG-27. Yeah. So just give them like an extra 20-point upgrade that gives them 3 RPG-28s, for example. And I mean, there's some specializations, and I'm actually looking through these as I'm talking right now. But there are some specializations where none of the infantry involved have a customization option. Yeah, the only 2 specializations where all the infantry in them have customization options is multi-battalion and Marine Corps. And the specializations that don't have any infantry with customization options include Guards Tank Brigade, Armor Brigade, and I'm going to include Striker Cav in here, even though they have snipers, which have a customization option. But I'd like to point out the snipers are basically just a holdover from Airborne. If they didn't have snipers, they wouldn't have a customization option, or they wouldn't have any infantry with the customization option. And I mean, it's snipers. The customization option is, well, no, it is still technically a customization option. I do have to admit that. So I guess I can't complain too loudly. I suppose another customization option that you could do is if you wanted to take weapon squads and make them cause even more people to pitch a fit, you could give them an option for like an extra 10 or 15 points that gives them the lightweight clue version of Javelin to boost their range from 1,300 meters to 1,500 meters. And that screeching sound you can hear in the distance is all the Russian fanboys losing their minds. Alternatively, since Airborne doesn't actually have a CQC unit, one thing you can do, and this wouldn't really make any sense for weapon squads. You could give them a customization option for maybe like 80 points that gives them shotguns, and that basically turns them into something akin to combat engineers, but with better guns. Like they get the shotguns. They might get some M249s, or better yet, some M250s. Can that be used? Hang on, M250. No, the M250 does have a medium range. Does have a minimum range for some reason, even though it's light machine gun. I really wish they would remove that. That is annoying. And then give them the M7, or maybe like the shortened carbine version of the M7 that the U.S. Army has indicated that it prefers. There we go, M7 rifle. Variants. The XM8. An improved carbine version of the M7. Not to get mixed up with the XM8 that's based off the G36. That's a barrel length of only 10.5 inches. The PIE XM7 has a barrel length of 13.5 inches. What's the original barrel length? Okay, so what's the barrel length of the SIG MCX Spear? 13 inches. Okay, so I thought the barrel length was longer than that. I mean, the M4 has a barrel length of 14.5 inches. Anyway, maybe you could give them something like the XM8 that does more damage and some shotguns and turn them into a door kicking team with 10 armor. It would be an option, yes. I'm not entirely sure how competitive of an option it would be, seeing as the alternative is, or like, it would be a customization option for weapons squad. And even if it was only 80 points, or heck, even if it was 75 points, it is a customization option that would replace what is arguably the best anti-tank infantry unit in the game. Anyway, that's just one thought. I suppose the alternative would be giving like Airborne a customization option to make them better CQC infantry. Which, granted, is something that you can kind of do if you just give them the standard weapons.
I'd like to point out the standard weapons do have better DPS.
I'm just thinking like with airborne, something akin to how you can swap between Rangers and Ranger CQC.
Although I'd still like to point out that Ranger CQC is much better at it.
Anyway, the next thing I wanted to talk about, and I suppose this is kind of a decent segue since I started talking about Rangers. The next thing I wanted to talk about was SOCOM specifically, because I have seen some people speculating about taking SOCOM's point allotment and adjusting it so that you have a small support tab. And I've seen people suggesting maybe taking like 250 points out of recon and helicopter to have a 500 point support tab. I've also seen people suggesting to just take 250 points out of recon to make a 250 point support tab. And if I had to weigh in on this, there's two options, for lack of a better term, that I would go with personally. Those two options are not to actually touch the recon tab, because that's kind of what makes SOCOM SOCOM, and to either take 250 points out of the helicopter tab or out of the air tab. And as things currently stand, I think I'm going to lean more towards taking 250 points out of the helicopter tab to just give you a little 250 point support tab. However, there is a second option here, and that is to just not change the support point allotment at all, but to still give SOCOM a couple of vehicles in the support tab. Now, as to what actually goes in the support tab, that's another question entirely. I've seen some people suggest giving SOCOM, and I actually agree with it here, so I'm gonna highlight it here. A couple MATV variants, because the MATV is already in the specialization. You can give them a troop transport MATV variant, which is just like the basic MATV with maybe an RWS, or heck, even without the RWS, just a guy on a flex mount with a 50 caliber or Mark 19 that can carry 9 guys. There's also larger MATV variants that can carry 12 guys. And then there's also a cargo variant of the MATV, which can carry, I think, 5 metric tons of supplies. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 5 metric tons. I've also seen some people suggest moving the War Pig over as a cargo variant and giving that a 2.5 to 3 metric ton supply. The ability to carry 2.5 to 3 metric tons of supplies, which I wouldn't be opposed to. I like adding both of those supply vehicles, the MATV supply variant and the War Pig, and the moving the War Pig over, making that a supply vehicle. I wouldn't be opposed to that, because the big difference is that the War Pig can be airdropped and the MATV can't. And I'm pretty sure the War Pig would actually have more supplies than the LMTV. For that matter, supports the Kamaz VDV can carry 2 metric tons of supplies. And I bring up the Kamaz VDV because that can be airdropped. The LMTV also carries 2 metric tons of supplies that can be airdropped. And the only other supply vehicle that can be airdropped that carries supplies, to my knowledge, is actually the LAVL, and that carries 2.5 metric tons of supplies. The difference between the two is that the LAVL cannot carry infantry, whereas the Kamaz and the LMTV can. So I suppose if you did move the War Pig over to a support tab in SOCOM, if you wanted to make it cheap like the LAVL, you could remove its ability to carry infantry. Otherwise, you could still keep the ability to carry 12 guys. Actually, that's a point. The LAVL moves at 100 kilometers an hour. Where is the War Pig? That's a vehicle. The War Pig is actually slightly slower and less armored. It can be airdropped though. The War Pig is slightly slower, less armored. Well, I mean, the War Pig's got better vision, but
as I'm looking at the prices now, if you're going to limit the War Pig just to carrying supplies, you'd probably have to drop it down to like 20 points compared to the LAVL. I mean, I suppose you could kind of get away with 25 points, especially if you armor it, or not armor it. If you arm it, because the War Pig does have a nice selection of weapons. But I mean, the LAVL can already go up to 45 points if you kit it out. Honestly, I think I think the move might be to put the War Pig in the support tab, give it like a 3 metric ton supply, a 3 metric ton supply load, keep the 12 seats, make it airdroppable for, I don't know, 40 or 50 points, at least as a base, and then put like a cargo variant of the MATV also there that has like maybe 18 seats and the same armor protection as the MATV, and the same armor package option as the M8, like the ability to up armor it like the MATV, but with a seating capacity of maybe like 18 seats for 60 points base, 70 points with the up armor package. And then maybe you could put like a M2 Browning or an M240 or Mark 19 on it as you see fit. Actually, that is a point. Where's the MTV? The MTV is a point of comparison. So the MTV would be 60 points with the armor package that gives it armor protection similar to the MATV. It would have the same seating capacity. The MATV variant would be able to carry slightly more supplies, and it would be slightly faster. So maybe 60 points. You can argue like base 60 points, maybe 65 points. The up armor package would make it 75 points. You could do this without actually, and you could do all this, and this is honestly what I would prefer, is you do all this without actually adjusting the point allotment in SOCOM, so that when you pair SOCOM up with something else, those two options appear in the support tab, but you're strictly limited to however many support points you have from what or the support. You are strictly limited to the number of support points that you got, or that is in your deck from the other specialization. So if you pair it up with armored, you got 1250 support points. If you pair it up with Marines or Airborne, you've got 750 support points. You don't actually get more support points, but you do have options that make logistics a little bit easier with some of these specializations. Because one of the big problems I have with something like an armored SOCOM pair up is, well, number one, your SHORAD is limited. You have things like the M6 and you have the PVADs, and you do have a number of options for man pads, but it still feels limited and kind of clunky. And number two, your logistics are also limited because the only support vehicle that you have is the M548, which isn't spectacular, if I'm going to be entirely honest. And you can make the same argument for something like a SOCOM Striker Cav pairing, because the only support option you have is the Hemet. And the Hemet's nice, but the Hemet's also kind of excessive, just to be entirely brutally honest, because it's 75 points base, and yeah, it carries 9 metric tons of supplies, which is nice, but at the same time, this isn't just a issue with a SOCOM Striker Cav pairing. This is actually a problem I've had with Striker Cav in general. But I just kept finding myself wishing that I had like a smaller, cheaper vehicle that could carry less supplies. Because I honestly think one of the best supply vehicles that the U.S. have is actually the MTV. It's fast, it's cheap, it's got a decent supply carrying load. I don't know. It carries a decent amount of supplies. It's pretty nice. The MTVR is also decent enough, I think. It's got more supply carrying capacity than the MTV. It's actually like 33% more. It's slightly faster, but it's also a little bit more expensive. And if you do want to if you do want to use the armored troop transport version, it cuts the supply capacity in half. Yeah, okay, it makes it tougher. And honestly, I like bringing armor packages on everything because I like them being tough. But it does create a bit of an issue, especially on the Hemet. Like the armored troop transport version of the Hemet still cuts the supply capacity in half, which is actually it makes it the same as the MTV. It's just the vehicle is 15 points more expensive. Well, it's 20 points more expensive than a base MTV. It's 15 points more expensive than an up armored MTV. Honestly, I'm kind of hesitant in general to equip my supply transports with weapons, but equipping them with armor packages is something that I like. Which actually, to go back to the subject of different customization options, I suppose a customization option you could give vehicles like the Hemet, the MTVR, and for that matter the two Ural variants over in motorized, is an up armor option that doesn't sacrifice on the supply load. So like you can up armor them, but instead of so you've got like flatbed multi-purpose, armored troop transport, and then armored multi-purpose. If that makes sense, it's a little bit more expensive instead of just being zero cost. It may be like 5 points, 10 points, whatever. But you have better vehicle armor without sacrificing supply capacity. That could be another thing that they could do. Anyway, I to get back to my point about SOCOM, I think they could do that and give SOCOM a a small support tab to help make logistics easier. One thing that I have also seen a number of people suggest that I don't want to include is giving SOCOM a mortar. I've seen people do things like I've seen people suggest giving them an 82 millimeter mortar on a Humvee chassis, which is something that actually exists. It's similar to I don't know if it's a 2-seat or 4-seat Humvee variant, but there is a variant of the Humvee that has a mortar that has an 82 millimeter mortar, and there's actually a variant of the ISV that has a 120 millimeter mortar. And I've seen people suggest giving something like that to SOCOM. I don't agree. And the reason why I don't agree is the same reason why I also don't think that coastal troops needs to get a supply truck. And the reason why is because I do not think every specialization needs everything. Specializations are supposed to have, well, specialties. They're supposed to be good at certain things and not good at other things. Like if I wanted to bring I wouldn't bring Armor Brigade if I wanted to airdrop stuff. But at the same time, I wouldn't bring Airborne Infantry if I wanted to, or if I wanted heavy armor. Specializations have things that they're supposed to be good at, things that they aren't supposed to be good at. And just giving every specialization a supply truck, I don't think is necessarily good because you can use their logistics capability as something that bottlenecks specialization, or rather balances it. Just like I don't think that every specialization should get a mortar carrier. I know that a lot of people will, if they want to attack a building or a point or whatnot, will use a mortar to just drop smoke
on the building or the point or whatever they want to assault, and then use that to cover the approach of a transport with infantry. And that's fine, and that's actually a pretty legitimate tactic, but it doesn't need to be something that every specialization can do. I don't think every specialization needs everything. I don't think SOCOM needs a mortar. Like, okay, if you want to give airborne infantry a mortar on the chassis of the ISV, then okay, I'd understand that. But I don't think SOCOM needs a mortar. Like, SOCOM is the one specialization in the US that would probably benefit the most from having a mortar, which is the reason why I don't think they need one, because they don't need to be able to do everything. Um, I don't think Coastal needs a truck, because I don't think Coastal should be able to do everything. I know Coastal is kind of like Marine Corps in that it's a very flexible spec. It can kind of do a bit of everything. So keeping Coastal limited, I think, is good to keep it from being too powerful. It's kind of like with Marine Corps. Marine Corps is a very flexible spec, but one of Marine Corps' big downsides is that they don't have a lot of support fires. If that makes sense, they don't have heavy artillery. Like, the heaviest piece of artillery they have is 120 millimeter mortar. They shouldn't have any large air defenses. I've always been against them putting the PAC-2 in Marine Corps, because it never really made much sense to me, because the Marine Corps spec is built around being a flexible assault force that does not have much support fires. That's what you're supposed to rely on the other specialization for. So if you've got, like, for example, Marine Corps Armor Brigade, Marine Corps is not supposed to be the one that's going to be providing the air defense or the artillery. That's the Armor Brigade spec's job. Or Marine Corps Airborne, same thing. Marine Corps Striker Cav, same thing. You can make an argument that it's weird when it comes to Marine Corps SOCOM, because it's only going to be Marine Corps bringing the support tab. But if you give SOCOM vehicles that go in the support tab without actually giving them support points, like I mentioned earlier, it's not that it's not that bad. Even though the only vehicles that you would be giving Marine Corps would be slightly cheaper transports. And B, you also have other options. Like, for example, with Marine Corps SOCOM, you don't have SHORAD. Well, you have some SHORAD in the form of the LAVL, or the LAVAD, I mean. But you could, for example, equip a Comanche out with 12 Stingers and use that like a SHORAD system. You don't have artillery, but you do have a wealth of helicopters and aircraft. So there are ways to get around it. There are ways to get around a lack of support points. And the fact that you can do this, I think, is one of the things that makes the deck building aspect of this game interesting. Not every specialization should have everything, because if it does, then it's bland and boring. So specializations need to have strengths and weaknesses, is the point I'm trying to get at. Now to move on to the meat of this video, after I've been rambling for about an hour, and that is largely going to be Russian centric things. And I have 4 things on this list. This list has 5 points, not counting the customization point that I made earlier. This list has 5 points, and 4 of them relate to Russia. And the first one is the Tu-95. Yeah, that might be a bit of a redundant point now. So the next thing is something that I'd like to see, is take the Iskander out of Coastal and replace it with the Bastion system. The Iskander, if I'm not mistaken, everyone knows what the Iskander is. if I'm not mistaken, it's used by the Russian strategic rocket forces. If I could find it. Okay, so what I was trying to say was that it's part of the Russian strategic rocket forces, which is the branch of the Russian military that operates more strategic missile systems, as the name implies. This does include Russia's nuclear-tipped intercontinental ballistic missiles. However, I can't find anything in this very quick search that I'm doing, because I didn't think to look this up before recording this, where it specifically says the Iskander is used by the strategic rocket forces. I, however, have seen one reference where it's used by the Russian ground forces, which I think is technically a different branch of the Russian military. I suppose you could argue that it would stay in coastal, but I think it would be better to move the Iskander over to the Russian National Guard spec and replace it with the Bastion system. Now, what Bastion is it is the K300. Here we go, the K300P Bastion. This is what I was looking for. And this is used by, if I'm not mistaken, the Russian Naval Infantry, or at least the Russian Navy, which is Russian Naval Infantry, Russian Navy. Yes, I know they're technically different, but they're very, very similar. In fact, I'd like to point out there's a number of units in the Russian Naval Infantry spec that are operated by the Russian Navy. The Ka-29 literally has a Russian Navy flag on the side of it. And I believe the Tu-142 is also operated by the Russian Navy. So putting the Bastion system in naval infantry would actually be a pretty good idea, I think. Now, the next question is, how does the Bastion system operate? What's it going to be like? And this is purely my speculation, but I think the Bastion system would be... It would be kind of like the two-missile version of... Where is it? Is it the Iskander K? Okay, yeah, it's the Iskander M with the ballistic missiles. So it would be kind of like the version of the Iskander K with only 2 cruise missiles, but the missiles would be moving a lot faster. The missiles that the Bastion system fires, I believe, are the P-800 Onyx. The missile used is the P-800 Onyx. Onyx as in Oniks, which is apparently Russian for ruby. The missile is fast. It apparently moves at several times the speed of sound, and it has about a 660-pound semi-armor piercing warhead. So this differs from, what is it? Is it the KH-55 that Iskander shoots? No, it's Caliber, isn't it? Yes, it is a variant of the Caliber that the Iskander K uses. What's the warhead weight in the Caliber? Warhead weight 400 to 500 kilograms. So presumably the Onyx would be doing slightly less damage than the missiles on the Iskander K. The missiles on the Iskander K do 70 damage. I'm trying to think of a missile that does equivalent damage. Where is the Ka-52K? Has the KH-35. How much damage, or what's the warhead size in the KH-35? Okay, the warhead weight in the KH-35 is actually pretty small at only 145 kilograms. What's the warhead weight on a 1,000-pound bomb? I need SOCOM. Where's the F-117? Where is the F-117? Because that carries 1,000-pound bombs. Well, even then, that's not a particularly like-for-like comparison, because the 2,000-pound bombs, which would have about 1,000 pounds of explosive filler, only do 56 damage, while the cruise missile does 70 with about the same explosive filler. So maybe you're doing something akin to 50 damage, give or take. You're doing about 50 damage for the Onyx missiles, but the Onyx missiles are moving much, much faster.
Instead of the, where's the Iskander again? Instead of the 900 meters per second that the missiles on the Iskander are moving, or the 1080 meters per second that the KH-35 is moving, you're probably looking at a maximum speed that would be more akin to the 1800 meters per second that the KH-32 is moving. You'd probably be looking for something more akin to that. And it'd be a ground launch system. You'd have 2 missiles. They would be fast. They probably wouldn't be unstoppable. I don't think they would. They'd be decent damage, decent blast radius. What is the blast radius of the KA-52, of the KH-35? 70 meters. What is it on the Iskander K? It is 100. And then what is it on a 1,000 pound HE bomb? 120. So you might be looking at like a 90 to 100 meter blast radius, give or take. Something that's in between the KH-35 and the caliber. And I think that would be a good option. The price point would probably be sitting at maybe 275 points to 300. I think 300 is a little bit steep. In effect, what it would be a Iskander K with much faster missiles that do slightly less damage and have slightly smaller blast radius. So when you think about it, I suppose you could argue that it would also be 250 points. But I think it's an interesting system that wouldn't necessarily be out of place in game. The next thing I wanted to mention was actually something that would apply to all Russian helicopters. And this is just a general Russian helicopter armament refresh. And I use the term refresh here mainly because you would also, or it would include a couple extra weapons for Russian helicopters. You have, among other things, the S5, which is like a 57mm rocket, which I suppose could be used on some Russian helicopters. It probably wouldn't be all that big. I don't really see why anyone would take it over the S8s, but I will mention it for the sake of completeness. The one thing, though, that I do want to highlight is that one of the biggest differences between Russian and U.S. transport helicopters is that the Russian variants do not have door guns like their U.S. counterparts do. However, this is something that Russian helicopters can do. Like the various Mi-8 variants, you can just affix a PKM or some other 7.62 by 54R machine gun to the doors. And Russia does have their own version of a 7.62mm minigun, which I also believe you can mount to the helicopters as well. Why not give them an option of mounting a door gun? Maybe instead of like a 7.62mm M240 equivalent as a base, and then going up to either a minigun and then a 50 cal, you would have nothing as a base, and then going up to a 7.62mm machine gun for like 5 points, and then a minigun for 10. At the same time, gun pods on Russian helicopters are limited only to 223mm autocannons, which is fine, but I believe that they can also mount other weapons and gun pods as well, so maybe you can have some choices there. But I would like to see I would like to see door guns on them. I think that would be a nice customization option. I'd like to see a little bit more flexibility in their armaments in general. One thing I don't expect to see is I do not expect to see bombs. I know some Russian helicopters can carry bombs, and I guess they could be useful, but, like, why? I know it'd probably be more expensive, but if I'm gonna be entirely brutally honest, I would never use a bomb in a helicopter. I would just equip it with rockets. Because the largest kind of bomb you could probably fit on a helicopter would be a 500-pound bomb, and that requires you to pretty much fly over the target to actually release it.
just equip it with rockets and use the standoff range. That's honestly the advice that I would give. Some people could probably use it if they wanted, but I don't think it would serve much of a point, is what I'm trying to get at. The next thing on the list is a little helicopter called the NSAT. What is it? ANSAT? Yes, ANSAT. The NSAT is a small Russian helicopter that is roughly equivalent to a Kiowa. The design even appears to be based off of the Bell 206, which is what the Kiowa, if I'm not mistaken, is actually based off of. Yes, the Bell 206. So the NSAT could act as a small Kiowa equivalent. And if I'm not mistaken, there are actually armed versions of the NSAT. Let me check here. Okay, yes, there is actually an armed version of the NSAT, and it looks less like a Kiowa and more like a mini attack helicopter. Specifically, it's the NSAT 2RC. It's derived from the civilian version. It's got a 50 caliber machine gun, which appears to be fixed, and two tiny stub wings with a total of 4 hardpoints. So you can use that as a sort of Kiowa equivalent slash mini attack helicopter. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Most of this is just spitballing, and this particular session was Russian focused, which isn't bad. I know that I rag on the Russians a lot, and I'm not gonna stop doing that. I will very much continue to be very pro-American because America, heck yeah, and no one is gonna change my mind otherwise. But speaking objectively, I do honestly kind of want to see the Russians get better. I am a U.S. main. I think that is very clear. Or I'm not recording videos, so I can't show you my deck list. But I have no Russian decks. Actually, if I'm thinking about it, when I record the B-roll, I'm going to show my deck or my list of decks. The only Russian deck I have is the default one. At the same time, though, one of the things that attracted me to this game, and is one of the reasons why I like it so much, is the asymmetric balance. It always annoyed me when I played different strategy games where units that were on different sides had the same stats. And I like this game because of the asymmetric balance. And if I'm going to be entirely honest, one thing that I didn't cover here that I could is I think a number of Russian units, and in particular their artillery systems and their infantry, could actually use a small price reduction. I think that you could make them cheaper, for example. A lot of Russian anti-tank infantry, I think, could have their price reduced by about 10 points across the board. And then Russian artillery, I think, could also serve to have their price reduced, particularly the Koalitia and the Mosta M2. I don't get why those are so expensive. I think a fully kitted out Koalitia should only be like 225 to 230 points instead of 260. And a Mosta M2, I mean, the Mosta M1, I believe, is 160 points base. That I honestly think could go down to 140. And the Mazda M2 is 190 points. I think that could go down to like 160. The Koalitia is 225 points base. I honestly think that could go down to 200. And the extended range version could is 260 points. I think that could go down to about 230. And I know people are going to immediately draw comparisons to something like the PZH 2000, because the PZH 2000 is also 225 points. The primary difference, I think, is that artillery is something that Russia is supposed to be good at. The base cost of a Koalitia and the base cost of a PZH 2000 is pretty much the same. There are some differences, like, for example, the Koalitia carries 10 more rounds. The Koalitia, actually, as I'm looking at it, has 100 meters shorter range than the PZH 2000. The PZH 2000 fires out to 4,300 meters. The Koalitia only fires out to 4,200. The stats are otherwise very similar. And one of the benefits of these is that they have a short reload time of only 4 to 5 seconds.
The thing is, though, is that also I noticed that the Kolizia has an autoloader and the PZH 2000 does not. Realistically, I think the PZH 2000 does have an autoloader and that they should probably give it one. The point I'm trying to get at is that Russian artillery is one of Russia's specialities. Like that's one of the things that they're good at. So I expect the Kolizia to be cheaper. Maybe like okay, maybe you don't want to bring it down to 200 points. Then maybe 210, and then I suppose the extended range version could be 30 points, so it brings it up to 240, which does give you a slightly longer range. It doesn't actually affect the accuracy. Russian G-Bad, that's another one of their specialities, and I think they're fine there mostly. Like I have seen some people asking for a version of the Cessna in motorized. You basically take the Cessna's 12 missile launcher and you put that on a BTR 82 chassis. And I guess I can see it, especially since as I'm looking at motorized now, you're kind of short on SHORAD. You know, you've got the OSA, you've got the Ural 4320 with the ZU-23-2 in the back, but you're kind of short on SHORAD in general, so I guess I can see it. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. I just honestly I got carried away at the end there explaining the asymmetric balance and what I'd like to see. I noticed, and I guess this is as good of a place to mention it as any, but I noticed that I actually reached more than a dozen subscribers. So at time of recording, there's a grand total of 13 subscribers on this channel. And if I'm gonna be entirely honest, 13 is like okay, yeah, sure, that's not a big number, but that's more than I honestly imagined people would. That's more than I'd imagined I'd get. I mean, to be fair, when your baseline is 0, or when your imagined baseline is 0, any number is going to be more than you imagined you were going to get. However, since it actually seems like there is a following of people watching these videos, I guess I need to start saying thanks for watching at the end. Because people are actually watching these videos. I know it sounds kind of rude or conceited or some word that I'm not thinking of, but I honestly never expected that I would actually have to start saying that because I honestly never expected anyone would actually watch it. But hey, apparently I'm wrong. So, anyway, thanks for watching.